Hey friend, by now you know that your anxiety is trying to tell you something. But what? It could be related to one of 5 different areas of maturity or capacities in your life. So, what are these 5 capacities, these 5 domains that we need to heal or grow in?
All right, let me try to name them.
Do it.
Okay, connection, independence and mastery, reality, emotional intelligence, and spirituality.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. We got a dab. Awesome. And we're going to be looking at what it means for wounds and gaps to create anxiety and undermine our capacities in these different domains. All things being equal in a perfect world, we would all receive all the life-giving experiences that we need as we grow up. However, we don't live in a perfect world. All of us experience life-robbing experiences that leave us with wounds and gaps. And it's these wounds and gaps that trigger anxiety. Memory reconsolidation allows for true healing that's permanent. Stay tuned. This episode's for you. Welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm Josh Spurlock. I'm a licensed professional counselor with a degree in biblical languages. I also developed a model of therapy called Neuroscience-Informed Christian Counseling and founded the faith-based therapy company, My Counselor Online. Every month, my team and I help thousands of people mature into their true self and experience true happiness. We have a 93% success rate and 4.8 stars on Trustpilot. It just works. And in this podcast, we share the secrets we've learned to true happiness, the abundant life that Jesus spoke of in John 10:10. So thanks for joining us. Let's learn something together. Hey friend, we are continuing our series on anxiety. And in this episode, we're going to be unpacking the 5 capacities of human maturity. And we're going to be looking at what it means for wounds and gaps to create anxiety and undermine our capacities in these different domains, and how healing in these capacities relieves anxiety and enables us to really mature into our true self and enjoy the full and abundant life that Jesus designed us for. So let's dive in. I'm joined by my lovely co-host and wife, Cassie Spurlock. And let's figure out how to mature and figure out how to relieve anxiety and what to do with what our anxiety is telling us. What do you say?
Yeah, that seems like a good plan. I really like talking about the 5 capacities because I feel like it gives language, it gives me something tangible to sink my teeth into, to like framework what's going on in me when I notice anxiety. And it feels so good that as I notice them developing and maturing and coming along, to be like, oh, another point in this capacity. Like, it's just helps me to tangibly celebrate and share that with others to celebrate with me.
Yeah, it's super fun. And this concept may be new to you. Like maybe you've never heard of human capacities or the idea of maturing in different developmental domains. But the basic framework for it is there are areas of life, kind of capacities for navigating life, capacities for giving expression of ourselves as humans in the world that are developed through life-giving experiences that we have with people. Then all things being equal in a perfect world, we would all receive all the life-giving experiences that we need through our parents and through our community as we grow up. And those life-giving experiences would develop each of these 5 domains and the capacity to live from maturity in those domains. We would fully mature into our true self, and we would fully experience the abundant life that Jesus designed us for. However, we don't live in a perfect world, and none of us experience all the life-giving experiences that we need to mature in the 5 domains. And all of us experience life-robbing experiences that leave us with wounds and gaps in these various domains. And it's these wounds and gaps that trigger anxiety. And so when we talk about listening to our anxiety and following our anxiety, we're talking about following it back to these wounds and gaps that are a part of one or more of these developmental domains. And as we find healing in those, it doesn't just relieve anxiety. It does relieve anxiety because it doesn't have, those things aren't sounding the anxiety alarm anymore. But in addition to relieving anxiety, it empowers us with new capacities for life and for relationship and for connecting. So I want to look at Ephesians chapter 4, 13 through 15 real quick, because I think it speaks to this a little bit and how God has given us resources in the body of Christ as a means of helping us mature and grow into the fullness of our true self in Christ, that we would become like Him as we mature into the version of ourself that He designed and intended for us to become. So looking at chapter 4 of Ephesians, we'll start around verse 11. It says, He's the one who gave these gifts to the church, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, and the pastors and teachers. Their responsibility is to equip God's people to do His work and to build up the church, the body of Christ, until we come into such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son that we will be mature and full grown in the Lord, measuring up to the full stature of Christ. Though we will no longer be like children, forever changing our minds about what we believe because someone has told us something different or because someone has cleverly lied to us and made it sound like the truth. Instead, we'll hold the truth in love, becoming more and more in every way like Christ, who is the head of His body, the church. Under His direction, the whole body is fitted together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so the whole body is healthy, growing, and full of love. So it's this idea that as each part does its own special work, as we love one another, as we bear one another's burdens, as we engage the community in the way that God designed us to do, it fills the gaps and heals the wounds that are inevitable parts of this life, and that helps us to grow. And as it helps the other parts to grow so that the whole body, all of us as a community of believers, is healthy and growing and full of love. So this is what we're trying to do here in this podcast. That's what this episode is about, is doing our part that God's called us to do to help people heal and mature and grow into the fullness who they were created to be. So, what are these 5 capacities, these 5 domains that we need to heal or grow in? So, I want to name them and then I'm going to unpack each one for you.
All right, let me try to name them.
Do it.
Okay, connection, independence and mastery, reality, emotional intelligence, and spirituality.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. We got a dab. Awesome. So, you're so cool. So cool. So connection. Connection is what in the scientific world and in the mental health world, you'll a lot of times hear referred to as attachment, right? It is our capacity to trust people, to be able to rely on and reach for people to be an emotional support to us, and to receive and offer co-regulation with one another in relationship, and to trust and have the confidence that when we need people, they're going to be there for us, right? And so it's what that world, the mental health world, calls secure attachment, that capacity. And when that capacity is wounded or underdeveloped is when we experience what is called insecure attachment. And you've maybe heard of insecure attachment showing up in 3 different forms, where it can either be avoidant, or it can be anxious, or it can be ambivalent, where we kind of bounce between avoidant and anxious. And those are just ways in which, when we are wounded in this connection domain, that those wounds show up. And each of them manifests with a lot of anxiety. Like, we think there's one that's called anxious attachment, right? Which is, maybe what we would think of anxious, anxiety. Okay, that would make sense. But actually, anxiety is present in all 3, because anxiety is a sympathetic nervous system activation. And in anxious attachment, the anxiety leads to this kind of clinginess and a pursuit, and this kind of fearful, I'm going to, feel like I need to, I don't believe you're going to be there. I can't trust that you're going to be there. And so it causes me to feel insecure and clingy in my expression of that woundedness.
Yeah.
Whereas avoidant folks, they feel anxious too. When they feel anxious, they cope with that. The immature habit that they use to cope with that is by withdrawing and disconnecting and avoiding connection with folks. And then your ambivalent folks are going to feel anxious, and they're going to vacillate between clinginess and withdraw and shut down. But all of those are expressions of woundedness in this domain of connection, right? And when we find healing from those wounds, so if we follow the anxiety, and if that anxiety leads us back to wounds of connection, and then we find healing around those wounds of connections, we move from this insecure connection or insecure attachment into a wholeness, a maturing of that connection domain in what is called earned secure attachment. And that wholeness and that connection capacity gives us the capacity, the ability to connect with people in a healthy way, to trust, to reach for each other and count for others to be there, and to be available for others to reach for us, and to trust that we're going to be there and not avoid and pull away. And this is key, because the idea that we would bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ requires that we reach for people in our need, and that we be there for others when they reach for us. Well, our capacity to bear one another's burdens is directly related to our capacity for connection. And so we cannot do that well for one another, and we cannot do that. We can't do that for others, and we can't receive that and reach for that for ourselves if we're immature, if we're wounded in this connection domain. So that's just one way, making this concrete, that wounds in connection show up in our day-to-day life and how they produce anxiety.
Or gaps.
Yeah, or gaps. So again, a wound is an injury that we have from something that should not have happened, but did. And a gap is a developmental hole in our story where we needed some things happen and they didn't happen. So, for example, when it comes to connection, we could have gaps where we reach for people and they weren't there. Right? We needed them to be there and they weren't. So there's an absence of something that was needed, and that has an impact on us that then maybe causes us to not believe that people are going to be there for us when we need them. Or maybe we reach for someone and they actively rejected us. Right? Something happened that shouldn't have happened. And we have that painful injury of being actively rejected in our time of need when we reach out for them. And it causes a wound there from the thing that happened that shouldn't have happened. And what's required to bring healing to that is a mismatching experience that can transform that bringing healing and writing that in our nervous system in a way that restores capacity or builds capacity in that domain.
Define what you mean when you say mismatching experience.
Yeah, I want to talk about that more later, but it's essentially having the experience today that we needed to have happen then. The experience that we had before was either maybe one of rejection, right? And what we need to have today is for that to be activated in our nervous system and for us to experience acceptance.
Yeah, we don't have to have the same structure of the experience. It just has to be a felt similar experience in our nervous system.
Yeah, it's an emotional mismatch and a emotional corrective experience. A relational corrective experience is different language in the scientific literature that's used around this. And so it's not necessarily a repeat of that event in that situation, but it's a reactivation of the emotional learning that came from that experience in a new experience while that's active in the nervous system that brings correction to the emotional learning that happened back then. So, connection. Second domain, independence, which is short for independence and mastery, which independence can be tricky because some will go, well, it's not really independence, it's more interdependence that we're developing.
Yeah.
And that's true, but you can't really have interdependence without independence, right? That independence is this capacity to have one's own thoughts, feelings, and opinions.
Yeah. I'm okay even if you don't, if you're mad at me, if you don't like what I say, if you don't agree with me, it's okay. I have everything I need contained within myself.
I can have my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and that's okay. And you can have your own thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and it's okay for us to be different. Other language around this in the literature would be like individuation, as we're kind of becoming our own self versus being enmeshed versus being unable to have our own thoughts, opinions, feelings apart from the significant people that are in our life. But when we are our own self, able to stand on our own 2 feet, we can be in relationship with others without being absorbed into them, nor do we have to run away from connection in order to keep from being absorbed in. We can be in an interdependent connection with folks as our own independent self, right? Which is sometimes gets confused because folks will see isolation and think it's independence, and that's not the same. But healthy independence allows for connectedness and maintaining connection while also maintaining separateness and being our own self. Folks that struggle with, say, people pleasing, independence is oftentimes the capacity that's underdeveloped for them. They're in this place where they feel anxious if they have their thoughts, feelings, and opinions that are different than others. They've had wounding experiences or a lack of affirmation of the freedom to be different.
Yeah.
And that lack of permission or the wounding experiences when they tried to be different left them feeling like if I am different, if I have my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions, I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to lose connection. I'm not going to be loved, which is scary.
So scary.
Right. And it triggers anxiety. It creates that alarm in the nervous system that says, hey, this is dangerous. It's dangerous to have your own thoughts. It's dangerous to have your own opinions. It's dangerous to give expression and disagree in some way because something bad will happen.
Yeah, you're not crazy when you show up in that way. There's actually a lived part of your story, whether you cognitively remember it or not, that directly affected you, that something happened or didn't happen. And that's why you show up like that.
Yeah. And the following of anxiety to the wound underneath that becomes the pathway of going, oh, I have something here that needs cared for. I need something here that needs to have a mismatching experience that allows me to heal and develops my capacity for independence.
So it's probably the domain that I work on the most.
Yeah.
We've all got our things.
And what has it meant in your life as you've done so?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I could just go on a large soapbox about this. What it feels like to me the most is peace in my nervous system and freedom and this sense of I'm an adult now. I do adult things. I make adult decisions. I make choices for myself. I trust myself. It feels really, really good.
Mm.
I don't need anybody in particular to be okay with me because I have other people in my life that can hold me up. My emotional homeostasis isn't dependent on one person or my kids being okay with me or my spouse being okay with me. It's like I can be okay because I am okay because I have the resources I need to be okay.
Yeah, which is huge, right?
It's huge.
That
Like I couldn't overstate how much it's been significant in my life.
yeah. I love the first thing that you acknowledged or noticed was the peace,
Mm.
right? And part of what you're naming there is that relief from the anxiety
Oh,
that we
yeah.
feel
Yeah.
around those wounds getting bumped into all the time.
I'm like always celebrating these things. I'm like, hey, I had a situation today that would have caused me to be really anxious before. And I felt so peaceful. And it's like, it's almost like when you're sick and then you get better and you're like, oh, I'm better. Like, I didn't even notice I was better because I feel normal and good. And so it's been so sweet for the Holy Spirit to be like, look what happened. Look what we're doing. And so, yeah,
Yeah,
feels good.
it's life-giving and
Yeah.
it frees you up to be you
Yes.
and step into your true self and the fullness of who God created you to be, and finding a lot of joy, a lot of peace.
Bandwidth.
Yeah.
Emotional, physical, mental bandwidth.
Yeah, we don't realize how much the anxiety robs our emotional energy. When that alarm system is going off in the nervous system, it consumes a ton of resources. And when we find healing and gain capacity in the domains where we've been wounded or had gaps, not only do we have that increased capacity in that domain, and not only do we have the relief from not feeling that anxiety, but we have back all of those resources that used to get consumed from that sympathetic nervous activation, and that we can use that energy towards other things in our life and relationships in our life and activities in our life, whether that's our work or our kids or our spouse or engagement in our community and serving in our church. Like, we just have life and vibrancy back in a way that is super cool.
Yeah, feels really good.
Yeah. So that's independence. Reality, which is short for realistic expectations and limits for self and others, which is a little bit of a mouthful. So we just kind of shorten it to reality to capture the idea. But reality is our ability to live grounded in our life, in the world that we live in, as it is, versus how we wish it were, which is a big deal. We can, when we are discalibrated from reality, that is, we either have wounds that cause us to be discalibrated from reality or gaps, we buck up against reality all the time. And we have trouble grieving and accepting how the world is different than how we wish it were, how people are different than we wish they were. And we lack an awareness of our right to use yes and no, to have boundaries, to be able to contain chaos in our world, or to the necessity of respecting other people's boundaries.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times, we don't like labels around here, but sometimes they're helpful just by reference for what folks are thinking you have heard.
Yeah.
Familiar with. A lot of times, like narcissistic behavior, narcissistic ways of showing up in relationship are highly related to deficits in reality and underdeveloped capacities, that they don't have realistic expectations for themselves. Believe they should be able to do whatever they want and everybody should be okay with that, which isn't a realistic expectation, that they can violate the limits of others, violate the boundaries of others, and feel like that should be okay, or that what rules apply to others shouldn't apply to them. Like, that's not reality. Or that they should be able to treat people however they feel, and that they should just go along with it and be okay with that. That, no one should hold them accountable for their behavior, or their choices, or their actions relationally. Like, that's not reality. That's like being out of touch with reality. And other times we can have this expectation that people are never going to let us down.
Yeah, we put them on a pedestal.
We put people on a pedestal and have the sense, whether it's a pastor or a leader or a friend or a spouse, and we're just shattered when their humanity shows up, because we have this unrealistic expectation that somehow they would be other than human.
Yeah. We like to say people are people.
People are people. Or we can have these perfectionistic tendencies for ourselves, where we have unrelenting, unrealistic expectations, where we just expect that we should never make mistakes and that we should do everything perfectly. Like, all of these are examples of what flows from wounds or gaps in the domain or the capacity of reality. And they create anxiety.
For sure. They're super uncomfortable.
Yeah. When we have these perfectionistic standards or unrealistic expectations of ourselves, and we have this fear that something bad is going to happen, generally because something bad happened.
Right.
Like, our experience always makes sense when we know the whole story. When we follow anxiety back, that anxious energy that drives perfectionistic behavior, we follow that back to the wounds that underneath it, we often find experiences in life, wounds, where being imperfect led to pain.
Yeah.
That our imperfection led to rejection, or the unrelenting expectations of a parent or others expected something that wasn't real. And we could never quite please. We could never measure up. And there's this wounding around that. And the anxiety comes from that. That whenever we're at risk of being imperfect in some way, the nervous system senses a threat around that. It's like, oh no, something bad is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it sounds the alarm. And that's the anxiety that we feel. What registers, what we put the label on it as anxiety, is that alarm based on that earlier learning as it pertains to this reality domain. And when we heal in those things, it then enables us to be more grounded in reality. And we have realistic expectation for ourselves, realistic expectations of others, and that capacity to have grace for ourselves, that capacity to have grace for others, all flows from this reality capacity that's there.
And, to have grace for others, to have grace for ourselves, also to have standards that we keep others to, or you may have heard them called boundaries, things that we will allow for ourselves or that we won't allow for ourselves. But when we're deficient in the reality domain, it's like we don't know where the standards are for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So thinking about boundaries, because a lot of folks, thanks to the wonderful resources by John Townsend and Henry Cloud around boundaries, there's better education around boundaries today and better understanding in the church today than there was, 30 years ago. But the interplay between independence and reality is real significant when it comes to boundaries. Like independence, is our sense that we have permission to have our own thoughts, feelings, and opinions. Right? It's our capacity to assert ourselves.
Yes.
Right? But we don't always know what kind of limits are reasonable.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what is reasonable for me to expect of others?
Yes.
What is reasonable to expect? And a lot of times when people are developing an independence, there's a pendulum swing in that where they kind of are like, I went from a place of never expecting to get what I want or not even knowing what I want.
Yeah.
In that, because I'm giving my self permission to be aware of my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions because they didn't matter, and I believe they didn't matter. To, now I'm aware of my wishes and wants, and I want what I want. I should always get what I want.
Everything that I want.
Should get everything.
Nobody better mess with my independence and my rights.
Right. So there's this pendulum swing, and that pendulum swing then bumps into reality.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, but we don't always get what we
don't always get
even
what
if
we
we
want.
know what it is, and even if we feel passionate about it.
Yes, and we should know what we want, and we should know what our own preferences are in situations. And reality is where we kind of learn grounded limits to where what is acceptable, what is all right for me to expect others in terms of my wishes, wants, and opinions, and what is an overreach in a way that violates other people's independence. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so independence capacity gives us the ability to know our own thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and the sense of permission to assert those and communicate those and articulate those. And reality builds off of that by then helping us have a realistic understanding of how that should make contact with other people's thoughts, feelings, and opinions. And again, in kind of wounds and gaps in reality that show up in a narcissistic kind of way, causes me to not respect the independence of others, and to certain, my thoughts, feelings, and opinions over theirs, rather than respecting their limits. A misunderstanding or deficits in reality could cause another person to not assert their limits. They may go, I know what my thoughts, feelings, and opinions are, but maybe it's not okay for me to say no in this situation.
One of the ways that my underdevelopment in reality has been a challenge for me in the past is like relationships that I hope will be a certain way or show up a certain way with certain people that don't have the capacities, but there was like a sense in me of, but what if they could? But I'm holding out hope, but I'm doing all these things. And I didn't realize how much I was trying to bridge the gap, but they weren't willing to bridge the gap. So being able to acknowledge those pieces in the reality domain allowed me to grieve those pieces and have freedom.
Yes. Yeah, reality, the capacity to grieve and to grieve well, which is so critical to being able to accept the imperfections of this world and the brokenness of this world and the immaturities and the brokenness of others, and to be able to live gracefully with people who are immature. Right? Like, we need grace in our immaturities, and others need grace from us. In that ability to extend grace to ourselves and to others, is a virtue of this reality capacity. And so our capacity for grace, or if we struggle with grace towards ourselves, towards others, oftentimes it's related to wounds or gaps in this reality kind of domain. It's also significantly related to our capacities for forgiveness. If we struggle with forgiveness, oftentimes that can be reflective of wounds or gaps or deficits in this reality domain. That for forgiving, we're able to, acknowledge the wounds that we have from others, the impact of others' choices. We can choose to not hold it against them. We can grieve the impact that their choices have on us, which enables us to forgive and let them off the hook.
Yeah.
And if we're not able to grieve, it makes it very challenging to, in a genuine way, not a superficial kind of way, but to actually forgive if we aren't able to grieve. So reality encompasses a great number of relational capacities that allow us to live out the gospel and allow us to be mature in the like to Christ-likeness. Then, so it's a big deal. The fourth domain is emotional intelligence, or sometimes we use EQ for short around here. And emotional intelligence has to do with our ability to recognize our own emotional experience, to be able to recognize the emotional experience of others, to be able to interpret it, kind of make sense of what our nervous system is telling us emotionally, to be able to perceive and make sense of the emotional experience of others. It gives us the ability to use this language part of our brain and connect the dots over to the emotional registering parts of our brain. That the emotional center of our brain, which is, we've shown before, inside of here, it speaks upwardly to our frontal cortex over here in the right hemisphere. That kind of mediates emotional experience, and then connects to language over here in the left hemisphere of the brain. And that up and down and left and right connecting of dots and information within our brain is what gives us emotional intelligence. It allows us to language our experience, which then allows us to share our experience with others in ways that help them see inside of us.
And I feel like if you've been watching this series and you're like, okay, I'm trying to do what you say, I'm noticing my body, I'm trying to get curious, and I just don't know what I'm feeling. I don't have words for this. I'm feeling a thing. This is maybe a deficit that you're running into.
Yeah, good news. What you're recognizing is a wound or gap in the emotional intelligence domain. So what do we mean by wounds and gaps in this domain? So an example of a wound in this domain might be if I grew up in a family where sadness wasn't tolerated or tolerable. Like, that tears weren't allowed. You weren't allowed to express being sad. And so at some point in my childhood, I showed up tearful, and somebody important to me said, "Stop crying, you big baby, or I'll give you something to cry about." Well, sadness just became really unsafe as a thing to feel or express. And then I have this wound that makes sadness then scary.
Yeah.
And when I then feel sadness, I feel anxious because an alarm system goes off in my nervous system and says, "Oh no, you're not allowed to feel that or express that. You gotta tap that down. You gotta package that away." And so anxiety then could inform me of a wound I have in this emotional intelligence domain that's related to this experience that I had, right? And so that'd be an example of a wound. Or on the gap side, maybe no one ever helped me put words to my feelings.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's just we didn't talk about feelings in my home growing up. And so I have feelings because we all have feelings, but I don't know what they are. I don't know how to connect language with what it is I'm feeling.
I know I feel good or bad. I feel angry,
Yeah, I
feel okay.
feel angry or happy.
Yes.
Brene Brown, who's a researcher in shame and an author, and somebody I really respect, and that will say that in her family growing up, you could be angry or you could be happy and okay. Those were the two things that were allowed in her house growing up, and so there was a gap there for her and wounds there for her around this emotional intelligence piece, that you weren't allowed to feel these other things, and we didn't talk about it, so we didn't have any language around it. And those are things that had to heal and build for her later in life. But those wounds and those gaps then result in us feeling anxious around emotion, and really take away from our relational capacities to share ourselves with others and to empathize with others, because emotional intelligence is required to have empathy. If you can't connect with emotional experience, you can't connect with others' emotional experience. If you can't connect with your own emotional experience, you can't connect with others. If you can't understand your own feelings, you can't understand other people's feelings, which really keeps relationship shallow.
It greatly limits
Relationship in lots of different ways. So, and it creates anxiety, we talked about. Fifthly, the fifth capacitor domain is the spirituality, right? And spirituality refers to our ability to know God as he wishes to be known, and to experience him and relate to him in the way that he wants to have relationship with us. And so to know him in truth and relate to him in the way that he wants us to. And it gives us the capacity to answer the big questions of life, right? Like, what is the meaning of life? What is my purpose? Why am I here? What does it mean for me to mature into my true self and to show up in the world in the way that's uniquely me and who God created me to be? How does God feel towards me? Is he angry? Is he like wagging his finger? Is he got a club waiting for me to make a mistake and he's going to whack me with it? Is he just waiting for me to make a mistake? Is he indifferent? Doesn't even know I exist.
Yeah.
That I mean nothing to him. I'm just a speck in the universe. All of these different kind of perceptions of who God is and how he feels towards us and what we think, again, are shaped by our experiences of life as it pertains to God.
Yeah.
So the messages that we got from our family of origin, from the church that we grew up in, or if we didn't grow up in church, the messages we got from Christians that we knew and how they showed up, or how they were portrayed on TV, or lots of different inputs that can shape our perception and concept of who God is, that may be more or less like he actually is. And our understanding of the nature of the kind of relationship he wants to have with us can limit our ability to what prayer looks like. Is prayer a monologue where we're just kind of offering a repetition of sayings out of a book of prayers, and we're offering them towards God, but we shouldn't have any anticipation of hearing anything back or actually having an interactive connection with him? And those are all shaped by wounds or gaps. And wounds and gaps in spirituality are distortions of who God is. And his heart and his desire is that we would know him in truth, and that we would have relationship with him that's personal and meaningful, and that we would be led by the Spirit in our life. And knowing what those words mean, like some people watching this are going to, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, led by the Spirit, what does that mean? What are you talking about? You can expect to have an interactive connection with God. Like, that sounds like crazy talk. Like, you don't have a box to put that in because you have gaps. You've never had experiences with God, and you've never had others share their experiences with God in a way that helps you have a framework for understanding a personal interactive walk with God that leads you day by day and moment by moment through life. Like, all of that's foreign and new to you. Or the idea that he really cares about you, that he has compassion for you, that he delights in you. Like, these all may be new things to you. And the first time you're hearing this, if you have wounds in the spirituality, and it creates anxiety.
For sure.
Lots of people, oh my gosh, we call it existential angst. You know, the fear of dying, right? That's related to the spirituality. That folks that have well-developed spirituality domain kind of face death as a part of life. And we have a hope for the life to come. We know that this isn't the end. And so we are able to grieve differently than because of the hope that we have. We can navigate life without fear for tomorrow because we have a confidence in the providence of God and his purpose and plans. And so that gives us peace instead of fear about the uncertainties in life and the things that we can't control, that are out of our control, or politics and what's happening in the geopolitical sphere and in the world. You know, when we have wounds or gaps in the spirituality domain, there's all sorts of anxiety that those things can create because they touch on this existential angst of the out of controlness that we feel in life and the uncertainty of things. These are all ways in which wounds and gaps in the spirituality domain trigger anxiety, or this thought that God is disappointed in us or angry at us, waiting for us to trip up. We're always kind of like, believing that God's going to strike us with lightning, or cause someone we love to die, or cause terrible things to happen to us if we misstep, if we aren't perfect. And that creates anxiety, right? It's fear, sympathetic nervous activation related to a wound or gap in this domain. So I hope what you're gathering here is an understanding of when we say your anxiety is trying to tell you something, and that you don't have to just manage the symptoms of anxiety. In fact, you're missing out on the gift that your anxiety has for you if all you do is manage the symptoms. That you're understanding that we can follow them back, and we're going to find in one or more of these 5 domains wounds or gaps that are triggering that anxiety. And as you might expect, that the more wounds and gaps you have, the more anxious you are.
Yeah.
And
it makes sense.
That, folks sometimes are like, I feel like I'm activated all the time. And sometimes they are, because they don't have just one wound or one gap in one domain that's getting activated, but they've got lots of wounds. They got lots of gaps. They've had experiences of life that have impacted them significantly. And those wounds and gaps are bumped into all the time. And they're just like, their nervous system is continuously being triggered in these ways. And even when they find healing in a wound or a gap, and they find relief in that domain, they still have others that are getting bumped into. And so they can kind of be confused. If you don't understand what anxiety is, you think, oh, it's back. Like, well, it might be back, but if you found healing here, this isn't back. That memory reconsolidation allows for true healing that's permanent, and it doesn't just come back. Symptom management comes back because we didn't address what was underneath. But true healing, that doesn't come back. Now, the alarm may sound again because we've got another wound that's been bumped into, And if we follow that, we find that actually leads back to a different place than the previous wound that we followed anxiety back to. And that can be, annoying. Like, ugh.
Yes.
What do you mean there's more than one source?
It does feel annoying.
It does feel annoying because the anxiety is felt the same.
Yeah.
Anxiety is generally felt anxiety no matter what the wound is that it's coming from. The felt sense of sympathetic activation in your nervous system feels the same. Like the smoke alarm sounds the same, whether the house is on fire or if there's cookies burning in the oven. Like the smoke is in the air, the alarm sounds, and it sounds the same. But the cause is not the same. And so when people say, what causes anxiety? What's causing my anxiety? I don't know. I know that
your nervous system knows.
Your nervous system is on alarm. And so at one level, at the shallowest level, that's what's causing your anxiety. There's an alarm sounding in your nervous system. Why that alarm is sounding, I don't know. But your nervous system knows. And if we get curious, the Thrive Drive will bring it forward and it will reveal what needs to happen in order to be healed. And that is the hope of healing that God has wired into our nervous system. We don't have to live anxious lives. 1 Peter tells us that the Lord wants us to find healing for our anxiety, to bring it to Him because He cares for us and He wants for it to be different. That's the promise for you. Hey friend, thanks for hanging out with us. If you've learned something, please subscribe and share it with somebody you love. You'll probably also like some of the other videos that we have, and so we'll link to those around here. Check them out, and we'll keep learning together. And remember, Jesus wants you to live an abundant life, to mature into your true self, like the version of you that He created you to be and that He wants you to mature into, so that you can experience true happiness in Him, a life characterized by peace, joy, and hope. And we're here cheering you on as you mature into your true self and experience true happiness. We love you, and we'll see you down the road.